of the delegation and the rules and procedures of this convention, Florida, 125 votes, President Trump.
Donald Trump's children, Eric Trump, Laura Trump, his wife, of course, an RNC official, Don Jr., Tiffany Trump, making it official. The Republican Party just moments ago making it official right behind me and Hallie Jackson here, formally nominating former President Donald Trump for president for the third time. Mr. Trump's home state of Florida, putting him over the top, giving him the majority of delegates needed to secure the Republican nomination to become the next president of the United States. All of this just moments after we learned Senator JD Vance will be his vice presidential running mate. And again, I'm here with Hallie Jackson. 2,268 delegates needed, Hallie. It's official now.
It is official, Kristen. We are in this campaign for real. No longer do we refer to former President Trump as the presumptive Republican nominee. This is his race, and what is so clear sitting in this convention hall, Kristen, this is his party. We're seeing that top to bottom here, unlike the last couple of times. Remember, this is his third time now officially being nominated for this position, obviously in 2016 and again in 2020. And his grip on the party has hardened in a significant way over the course of the last 8 years or so. It is, let's acknowledge it, somewhat incongruous, of course. This is a party in many ways, conventions usually are, to be listening to celebrate good times after what happened just 2 days ago, and that attempted assassination against the former president, as he has described how surreal it was now in a pair of new interviews to have that bullet whizzing past his head, striking his ear, obviously, saying he's supposed to be dead right now, and instead here he is getting ready to accept the nomination officially, Kristen.
Yeah, and how I spoke to someone who'd spoken to the former president who described him as contemplative, feeling like he has a new lease on life. And there was a big question about what the tone would feel like here at the Republican National Convention. Well, right now, the tone, as Hallie just said, is one of celebration. Let's bring in Jacob Soboroff inside the convention center right here in Milwaukee. And Jacob, I understand you just spoke with the Trump family. What'd they tell you?
I did. They feel very grateful, Kristen, for obviously the fact that their father survived. It was a miraculous survival. And in the words of Don and Eric both, this is a very special day for their family. They're now moving out of the Florida delegation where they've just been able to put him over the top. Let's see if we can walk a little bit with them as they go. But obviously from this point in the Florida delegation, here's Don right now. Let me see if I can get Don.
Keep fighting for this country. That was everything for me. I just literally told him, I go, you're the biggest.
I'm going to let Kimberly out here. Kimberly, how do you feel about JD Vance being the vice presidential nominee?
I really like him personally. I think he's a good man. He's a great father, a great husband, a great American who served the country. He's intelligent, articulate, he's thoughtful, contemplative, and we want someone like that, a steady measure that will really enhance and really be part of the ticket to support President Trump in this mission to take back the country and the America First movement.
What can you tell us about the former president's decision, why he chose JD Vance when he made up his mind?
Well, he had a tremendous amount of amazing candidates to choose from, and he was really thoughtful about the whole process, evaluating everything, what would be in the best interest of the country, and someone that he thinks would be best to serve the country if he were not able to as commander-in-chief. And I think that's an important decision, especially in light of the horrific violent events that occurred, the coward trying to take the life and assassinate the 45th president of the United States. So that was a lesson in American political history, that the choice of vice president matters. And so now we feel really happy and confident about this, that we are in very good shape as a country to move forward if the American people are willing to re-elect President Trump and now potential vice presidential nominee.
Thank you very much. We're very glad that the former president's doing well. Appreciate it. Thank you. Kristen, I'm going to send it back to you. I'm going to see if we can get Don when he frees up in just a moment.
All right, Jacob, we'll come back to you if you get that interview. Really fascinating to hear from Kimberly Guilfoyle there. Again, the girlfriend of Don Jr., who is very supportive of this pick of JD Vance to be Donald Trump's running mate. It is worth noting, Hallie, as we sit here There were some boos
Yeah.
that erupted here on the convention floor. It was when Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell walked out onto the floor. And it really underscores the fact that the Republican Party is unified, and yet there are still divisions within it. McConnell has been critical of former President Trump, particularly in the wake of January 6th. He only recently endorsed him, something that infuriated the Trump team. What did you make of that moment and where we are right now?
It tells you a lot about the arc of the Republican Party, Kristen, and exactly what you're laying out here and what you're describing. Remember, you're talking about the top Senate Republican. In any other universe, right, this would be somebody who is right up there with the former president, with his cabinet members as far as stature and respect inside the party. And while, of course, there are those inside the establishment, quote unquote, who continue to support Mitch McConnell, he does not have the grip on the conference in the Senate side that he once had. That is just, I think, in plain reality over the course of the last 5-6 years or so. A striking moment to hear those boos on the floor. You and I both turned around because we thought, wait a second, what's going on down there? As there is so much action. We know the Trump kids are down there. Obviously, Laura Trump, his daughter-in-law, who heads the Republican National Committee, as well as you saw Eric Trump, Don Jr., and then Kimberly, as we just saw with Jacob.
It was notable. Kimberly Guilfoyle said something to Jacob Soboroff, Hallie, that stood out to me. She really stressed the importance of the vice presidential pick. And it comes, of course, as Republicans have been so focused on Vice President Kamala Harris in the wake of these swirling questions about whether President Biden would ever pass the torch after that debate performance that he had several weeks ago. It was a reminder that the vice presidential nominee will be in focus in this election cycle.
And I would not be surprised to see JD Vance take on the role of the primary Kamala Harris attacker, if you will. Think about that moment when the two of them potentially, we don't know that this has been nailed down yet, but take a debate stage and go head to head. And the contrast between these two candidates, both seen inside their own parties in different ways as the next generation of leadership, with two candidates who obviously are in their late 70s and early 80s. And so it is a contrast in every way at this moment.
All right, we're going to go back to the action and Jacob Soboroff with Don Jr. Jacob?
We just got boxed out of the scrum. I'm going to go around one more time, guys. I'm going to send it back to you until we can get in there.
If anybody can get him, it's Jacob.
Jacob can get him. Keep trying. Well, Jacob, we're going to stay with you, actually, on the floor. Narrate, if you would, for us what you're seeing, what you're hearing
guys.
down
So,
there,
as you can see, it's very busy. He's about to come through right here. Let's see. Come on through. I'm about to get my head pinched, guys. Here we go. Sorry, guys.
On the electoral just with his background and with that story, and so I couldn't be happier.
You're now live on CBS. Explain to those watching why you think JD Vance is the best man to run with your phone.
Listen, I think he's lived the epitome of the American dream story.
All right,
I think
Jacob,
he's the
we'll
guy
come
that's
back
capable
to
of bringing
you
that same success.
when you get a little closer to Don Jr.
Is that classic convention floor or what?
That's the incredible thing about being on the convention floor. Democracy in action, right, Hallie? One of the things I'm struck by as we talk about this pick of JD Vance is the issue of abortion. We have seen JD Vance shift his views in a range of different areas, one of them in the very way he talks about Donald Trump, again, going from a self-described never-Trumper to one of Trump's fiercest critics, but also on this issue of abortion. He was asked recently about the Texas ban on abortion that doesn't include exceptions, and he sort of downplayed that. That was something that the Trump team was looking at. He has moderated himself on Meet the Press 2 weeks ago. In fact, he echoed Donald Trump saying, I would support the abortion pill continuing to be accessible to all Americans, mifepristone. What do you make of the issue of abortion and how it may play out in this election cycle?
It'll be front and center in the minds and in the eyes of Democrats who want to press that case. They want to press that issue, Kristen. And JD Vance will be somebody, I think, and we are waiting, of course, on any reaction from the Biden-Harris campaign to this news on the issue of reproductive rights. And the reason for that is because Democrats have seen this as a mobilizing issue. They believe that there will be increased turnout if they can get their supporters to get out there to vote come November. We saw that. They saw that after the overturning of Roe versus Wade back in the midterms. And so there is a sense, can that be replicated? That is why I think you will see that be front and center, especially, again, with Vice President Kamala Harris. She has been in so many ways the face of the administration's push on that.
It's so interesting. She He has been tasked with dealing with the issue of migration, various other issues, but it's that issue, Hallie, reproductive rights, abortion, where she's really been front and center. Well, Mr. Trump's running mate could have a huge impact on the campaign trail and who ultimately wins the general election. Our Gabe Gutierrez has a closer look at who Senator Vance is and what he brings to the table.
He is the junior senator from Ohio with only 2 years in government, but JD Vance is one of former President Trump's biggest defenders.
I want to help Donald Trump get elected because it's really important that he become the next president.
In the Senate,
how can we defend Ukraine's borders when we're not even defending our own American border?
And on the campaign trail.
The question is, are we going to send America First fighters to Washington, D.C.?
He's one of the leading voices of Trump's MAGA America First movement, not holding back and pushing the former president's agenda.
Republicans, we need to govern like we won the majority the American people gave us, not like a bunch of cowards.
But that hasn't always been the case. This was Vance in 2016.
I'm a never Trump guy. I never liked him.
He was deeply critical of Trump then, but here's Vance just 6 years later.
The president is right. I wasn't always nice, but the simple fact is he's the best president of my lifetime, and he revealed the corruption in this country like nobody else.
Running for Senate in 2022 in Ohio as an extremely pro-Trump candidate.
I was wrong about Donald Trump. I didn't think he was going to be a good president, Brett. He was a great president.
Vance shot to fame as the author of Hillbilly Elegy, a memoir about his upbringing in a poor, hard-hit part of Ohio. He then enlisted in the Marines, went to Yale Law School and to venture capital, and then to the Senate, his first role in government. On the major issues, Vance has said he would support a national ban on abortion after 15 weeks, but is for exceptions, including for rape and the life of the mother. On immigration, Vance has called for finishing Trump's southern border wall. And on the issue of the 2020 presidential election, then Senate candidate Vance suggested he would have supported fraudulent slates of pro-Trump electors.
If I had been vice president, I would have told the states like Pennsylvania, Georgia, and so many others that we needed to have multiple slates of electors, and I think the U.S. Congress should have fought over it from there. That is
now the father of two, just 39 years old, after not even a full 2 years in government, is set to step onto the biggest political stage in the world.
And our thanks to Gabe Gutierrez for that report. Again, the headline here from Milwaukee, the Republican Party has made it official. Donald Trump is officially the party's nominee for president. It comes as Mr. Trump has announced that Ohio Senator JD Vance, 39 years old, will be his running mate. We will continue to bring you updates as we get them. But for now, that concludes this NBC News special report. We'll have much more ahead on our streaming network, NBC News Now, online at NBCNews.com, and a full wrap-up tonight on NBC Nightly News. Plus, do not miss Lester Holt's exclusive interview with President Biden, which will air in full at 9 p.m. Eastern. And our coverage of the first night of the Republican National Convention kicks off at 9:30 Eastern. Our thanks to everyone, Hallie Jackson, Jacob Soboroff, everyone on the floor, as well as Ryan Nobles. I am Kristen Welker. Thank you for watching.